Well, this is the latest sign of America's demise. Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Well, when it comes to the end times, the United States is noticeably absent in what the Bible has to say. And if we're nearing the 7-year tribulation, as I believe we are, we would expect to see United States financial and military influence waning and decreasing on a global scale. I believe that's exactly what we're seeing. And the latest sign is this. This is from the Gatestone Institute International Policy Council. It's titled, China is Taking War to Earth Orbits. A Space Pearl Harbor is on the way. And it goes on, it starts with this quote. It says, with our commercial assets, we have observed 5 different objects in space maneuvering in and out and around each other in synchronicity and in control. The U.S. Space Force's Vice Chief of Space Operations, General Michael Gutland, told the 16th Annual McAleese Defense Programs Conference in Arlington, Virginia. That's what we call dogfighting in space. They're practicing tactics, techniques, and procedures to do on-orbit space operations from one satellite to another. Gutland's stark comment about China signals a break with the past. This marks the end of the Western American liberal dream of nations leaving wars on Earth so they can cooperate in space to advance humanity. Richard Fisher of the International Assessment and Strategy Center told Gatestone after the general's widely publicized remarks. Quote, Communist China has now taken war to the heavens, to low Earth orbit, and very likely will take war to the moon, Mars, and beyond. The heavens are no longer safe for the democracies. Space is now a highly contested domain, but it wasn't always this way. We told ourselves we would be the dominant power forever. Brandon Weichart, author of Winning in Space, How America Remains a Superpower, said to Gatestone, we coasted on that notion for far too long. Rising powers, notably China and Russia, saw how reliant we were on space and how poorly defended our systems were. Our access to the strategic high ground is now more threatened than ever before. And guys, I believe this is the case. We've been coasting in the United States for so long. I was, in grade school when the Gulf War Desert Storm took place, and that was such an overwhelming victory, and going into that, many people didn't expect that. But there was widespread technological superiority displayed by the American military, and I think people have just assumed that's still the case, but it is not the case anymore. As Weichert points out, bureaucratic inertia and a lack of visionary leadership from both political parties allowed China and Russia to develop the capabilities to threaten America in space. There was another party at fault. The U.S. military failed to protest when it could see there was an obvious threat. There was a gentleman's agreement until recently that we didn't mess with each other's space systems, Gutland said. We didn't jam them, we didn't spoof them, we didn't laze them, we just kept them safe. Why was the U.S. so gentlemanly? Presidents believed that because the U.S. had more space assets than others, it was not in America's interest to trigger a race to build weapons to destroy those assets. Yet this view, appearing common sense at first glance, was naive. I was going to say, it sounds naive at first glance to me. It was apparent even then that neither China nor Russia could be enticed into good behavior. Generals and admirals should have sounded the warning. There was a lot to warn about. On January 11th, 2007, for instance, China demonstrated its intentions by launching a modified ground-based DF-21 missile to destroy an old Chinese weather satellite. In 2022, a Chinese satellite, quote, grappled a defunct Chinese satellite and towed it to a graveyard orbit. Moreover, as Fisher notes, China had already configured its one large orbiting platform, the Tiangong space station, for military missions as well as civilian ones. One of its modules can launch either very small satellites that can perform interception missions or satellites carrying powerful laser and microwave weapons that can destroy satellites in multiple orbits. What was the American response to the obvious advances in space warfare capabilities by the Chinese? Well, Vice President Kamala Harris in April 2022 announced a unilateral moratorium on ground-launched anti-satellite missile tests in the hopes that other nations would follow. And guys, hope. It's never a good policy unless you're talking about putting your hope in Jesus Christ when it comes to running a business or being a politician, putting out policy, laying out policy, or a military planner laying out policy. Hope. You want to try to have something more than hope to lean on. It says, with this posture, it's no wonder why America's lead in space warfare, if it exists, and I don't know that it does, is narrowing. Now, China is making fast progress in building space weapons. The Chinese ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities, are becoming very capable, Gutland said. They have gone from what we used to call a kill chain to a kill mesh. A kill mesh combines intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance satellites with an array of weapons systems. The Chinese array appears impressive. As Fisher points out, the People's Liberation Army has developed ground-based ASAT, anti-satellite interceptors, to destroy satellites in both low orbit, Earth orbit, and much higher medium Earth orbits. At the same time, China, as Gutland's comments make clear, is working on co-orbital interceptors, satellites that can follow, approach, dock with, or use robotic arms to grapple other satellites into useless orbits. For the future, Fisher reports, China is developing large unmanned space planes that can re-enter the atmosphere to maneuver toward a new orbit, and then relaunch into space to deploy energy and missile weapons. The PLA also appears to be working on large combat platforms that can attack satellite targets in multiple orbits. Expect the Chinese military also to deploy clusters of combat satellites to attack the lunar and Martian satellite networks of the future, and who knows if we'll ever even see those. Quote, the recent demonstration of Chinese dogfighting capabilities in space is an indicator that Beijing means to use force on Earth, says Weichert, by targeting sensitive U.S. military satellites. The People's Liberation Army can render us deaf, dumb, and blind long before it strikes. The Chinese are evidently planning to blind not only America's military, but also America's civilian society, which is heavily dependent on space assets. Almost nothing modern in America will work when the Chinese are finished attacking in the heavens. As Weichert said, a space Pearl Harbor is at hand. And guys, when I read that, it reminded me of a video we did about 3 years ago in this 2022 article from The Sun titled, China Convinced It Needs to Hit U.S. with Pearl Harbor-Style Surprise Attack to Win War Over Taiwan, warns experts. So no doubt about it, the United States remains vulnerable to a surprise attack, to a Pearl Harbor-like attack, a replay of what happened back in December 1941. But unlike that time, the United States is much weakened. In World War II, the United States won by outproducing all of its enemies combined. The United States was the industrial and manufacturing behemoth of the world. That is no longer the case, and the United States is falling behind technologically. This edge is no longer present. We now live in an age of drone warfare, not in an age of these conventional post-World War II weapons. Again, we see headlines like this just from Wednesday. Houthis claim third MQ-9 Reaper drone downing in 10 days. It says this is at least the 18th since the Red Sea conflict started in December of 2023, guys. So here we are, 16 months later, the mighty United States military has failed in its mission to open up the Red Sea to shipping and free international trade. It has absolutely failed. And it's not up against a major superpower. It's up against Yemen. So, guys, we are entering a new time period. We talked about this on Friday as well. If you missed it, go watch this global reset unfolding. Everything just changed forever, and this is why. We talked about the post-World War II financial and military order is undergoing a complete restructuring. And it's unclear what's going to happen on the other side of that restructuring. I believe the United States will no longer be the superpower it has been since the end of World War II for various reasons. You know, we can talk about, well, the pullout of Afghanistan and the message that sent. Immediately, Saudi Arabia signed an arms deal with Russia. We've seen an end to the petrodollar and the BRICS nations and their assault on the dollar, trying to de-dollarize, trying to get under the thumb of the United States. The backlash against the sanctions, especially being cut off by SWIFT following the Russia-Ukraine war. All of these things have led other nations to dump U.S. treasuries, acquire gold instead as the reserve asset, to not look to the United States. The United States is seen as an unreliable partner around the world to those who have traditionally been our allies since the end of World War II. So we're seeing United States financial and military influence significantly trending downward. I believe ultimately the rapture of the church will be the nail in the coffin that ends that. Because we talked again in that video on Friday about the relationship between having the world's reserve currency and having the world's largest military and being able to project military power across the globe, and how that then increased the financial might of that country and gave its currency that global reserve currency status. We're seeing all that come to an end, both on the military side, where Yemen has stood up to the United States and prevailed, where the Taliban stood up against the United States and prevailed. And also in the financial front, where we're seeing markets crumble. We've seen the United States industrial and manufacturing base completely hollowed out and replaced with this financialized industry of traders trading pieces of paper and exporting those pieces of paper to the rest of the world rather than real things. And so, guys, the United States, I believe this is just the latest instance of America's demise. And this is what we should expect to see in the last days. Again, because the Bible does not point to the United States as this great power in the end times. So we would expect to see this. And guys, you know, I don't know. What do you think? Leave your comments below. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. I don't see where the Bible mentions the United States. And again, we see all of these things happening around us that point to the nearness of the 7-year tribulation. And at the same time, we're seeing the role of the United States on the world stage dwindling, especially recently in financial markets with the turmoil that we've seen over tariffs, trade wars. So guys, we need to be prepared for this. I don't know for how much longer the church will be around for this. I don't know. But you need to be prepared for it. God willing, tomorrow on the Substack, over on the Substack, be on the lookout for an article on how to prepare for the coming bank holiday. Because I believe what we've been seeing in headlines recently is taking us to another banking crisis similar to what we saw in the spring of 2023. But this time, rather than bailing everything out, they're going to let one of those banks fail, thinking, well, this isn't a systemic risk to the system and our well-connected, politically well-connected friends, so we'll let this fail. and they'll follow the law, which requires a bail-in. And that's going to ruin a bunch of businesses. It's going to make a bunch of headlines, and it's going to wake people up to realize if you've got anything in a bank above that FDIC limit, you're going to be the one bailing in the bank, not getting bailed out by taxpayers. And so we're going to see a run on banks. We're going to see a collapse of the financial system as we know it. We're going to see a credit crisis where credit freezes across the world and they have to institute a bank holiday. That's what they call it. We're not talking about a day where everybody gets off to take a vacation. We're talking about a time period we last saw in the United States during the depths of the Great Depression, where the banking system is shut down for a week, 2 weeks, maybe longer, in order to restore confidence in the system and try to bring everything back up online. And that could be quite a chaotic situation, so we need to make sure that we're preparing ourselves for that. And again, as we mentioned in the video on Wednesday, it's the perfect opportunity for sharing the gospel with those who are not going to be at peace during that time. We need to be preparing ourselves to be able to share with them the hope we have in Jesus Christ. So again, be on the lookout for that article tomorrow on Substack. Again, thank you to all of you who have encouraged us over the past several weeks, who have sent out prayers, encouraging words. Those of you who are supporting us by being paid members on the Substack, we so much appreciate it. If you want to be a paid member but you can't afford it, send me a message over on Substack. No questions asked. We will gift you one of those paid subscriptions. So just let us know. Head on over to the Substack at brittgillette.substack.com and say hello. And then till next time, God willing, I will see you on Monday.